Hello and welcome to another game review. Today we're looking at Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade is a third-person melee action adventure with light puzzle elements and a heavy narrative focus. It was developed and published by Ninja Theory and was released in August 2017. From the Steam store page, set in the Viking Age, a broken Celtic warrior embarks on a haunting vision quest into Viking hell to fight for the soul of her dead lover. And just a note, I'll be reviewing the PC version of Hellblade. The game also has a VR version that is included when you buy the game, but I will not be discussing it here. First up, the technical bits. The system requirements for PC are on screen now, and you'll definitely need at least a mid-range system, but it's not too ridiculous. The one thing really worth noting is that Hellblade does not support screen resolutions below 720p. That's not going to be an issue for the vast majority of players, but if you're still gaming on a monitor from back before 16:9 became the norm, it may be time to upgrade. Overall, the game ran worse than I'd have liked, but not badly enough to ruin the experience. My issue was never a low overall frame rate, but there were definite instances of frame dips and stutters. I also experienced two crashes. One was during a puzzle section, and the other was when I was actually in the menu to quit the game. So no real harm done, but crashing is never a good thing. A lot of my performance issues were resolved by cranking down the graphics settings. Keep in mind that I was recording the entire time, but I still had to neuter the settings much more than normal for when I record footage. I didn't have any noticeable issues in combat, and I also didn't notice any serious bugs in my playthrough. Overall, on a technical level, I'd say that the game is perfectly functional, but the optimization leaves a bit to be desired. In my game reviews, I usually go over visuals, then music and sound, then story. I don't feel like that's really possible here, simply due to how almost every single artistic decision was done for the benefit of the story. I'll still structure it a bit, but there's going to be some overlap. So as I mentioned earlier, our heroine Senua is on a journey into hell to save the soul of her lover Dillion. Pretty standard as far as fantasy stories go, right? Wrong. The defining characteristic of Hellblade's story is that it explores severe mental illness. Specifically, Senua suffers from some form of psychosis, and Ninja Theory did actually consult with people who experienced psychosis as well as neuroscientists to make sure that their portrayal was accurate. I won't be commenting on how accurate Senua's mental illness is portrayed because, quite frankly, I have no idea. I'll only discuss it as it pertains to the overall presentation of the story. The art is done in a relatively realistic 3D rendering. However, a lot of individual assets, most notably enemies, just don't feel solid, for lack of a better term. I think it's safe to assume that a lot of the otherworldly aspects of Hellblade are actually hallucinations, and this choice to have the enemies be these featureless husks does a good job at showing the audience that it's not real, but also conveying their intimidating presence. After all, they are very real to Senua. The game overall felt like it was pretty, though nothing ever blew me away in terms of scenery. It was really the unnatural elements that I found intriguing. One thing that was common is that your field of view would oftentimes fill up with symbols or other light effects whenever there was some sort of supernatural puzzle to complete. I'll go a bit more in-depth on this during the gameplay portion, but it really did a good job at conveying the fantastical nature of how Senua views the world. Whenever something graphically weird popped up, that was where I felt the most immersed in the game. A good example of this was the level where you had to quickly locate a set of symbols while being chased by this amorphous fire monster. Most of the warning for its arrival was seeing the red and orange of the flames slowly get brighter as it got closer. Every so often you get a little peek at it from around a corner, and it was this metallic, bulging mass that didn't seem to have any distinct form whatsoever. It was fucking terrifying. Throughout that section, my heart was legitimately pounding and adrenaline was coursing through my veins. These weird little artistic decisions made such an impact, and Ninja Theory are to be commended. One complaint I do have about the presentation is that in a decent number of cutscenes, the audio was out of sync with the video. And it wasn't minor either, sometimes it was a full 2 seconds of delay. That really took me out of the experience, and I was honestly shocked that this kind of thing was allowed to happen. It legitimately hurts the narrative presentation of the game overall, and it's a damn shame. I don't know why I had desynchronized cutscenes half the time, but it was very frustrating. The most notable piece of sound design is the voices in Senua's head. They are a constant. You hear them throughout the entire game. The loudest and clearest will often narrate Senua's life, almost as if speaking directly to the player. The others speak in rapid succession, offering commentary and unsolicited advice. They constantly feed doubts towards Senua, but I never got the feeling that they were outright antagonistic. As much as they would say, "Oh, it's too dangerous, you'll never make it," they'll offer astonishment and mild praise whenever Senua accomplishes certain tasks. They also serve a very interesting purpose in the gameplay. A lot of games are filled with indicators and help markers to assist the player. This is all well and good, but something like that would have disrupted what Hellblade was trying to do. These voices act in place of an in-game UI or help system. They'll give little comments that provide hints on how to find the key to a puzzle. In combat, they'll yell out warnings when an unseen enemy is about to attack from behind, or when an enemy is about to use an attack that can't be blocked, only evaded. The voices did a really good job at filling the void between different in-game events. In other games of this style, there will almost always be sections where you either don't have to be doing much, such as when you're traveling between 2 points, or if you're trying to figure out a puzzle or navigate an area. When this happens, there will usually be a lot of nothingness to the sound, and I personally tend to zone out a bit. But Hellblade's voices kept me engrossed in the game so that I always felt like there was something going on, some reason to actually be fully immersed. The music was mostly minimalistic, with either no actual music or music designed purely to be atmospheric. On its own, this is a fairly neutral thing, but I personally always need something else to be present in the game to keep me engaged when this musical direction exists. Of course, this may be a personal bias, as I love games with awesome in-your-face soundtracks like Celeste, The Messenger, Doom 2016, etc. I feel like the voices did a good job at filling that gap. Again, they're always talking, giving you guidance, adding a unique aesthetic, and acting as a pseudo-UI. During boss fights, the music becomes more upfront into what can be considered an actual soundtrack. These were nothing special. They fit what the game was going for and were a good companion to the combat, but for the most part they weren't memorable to me. With one exception. During the final fight of the game, which I obviously won't spoil, a completely different type of song plays. It's this intense and hypnotic song that honestly made me think of the Nier Automata soundtrack. Unfortunately, I can't play it here due to copyright issues, but the song is Just Like Sleep by Passarella Death Squad. Go check it out. That music added so much to that fight alongside some crazy light effects and combat alterations, all leading to the culmination of everything the story built up to. I really wish I could explain, but I can't without spoilers. What I will say is that this choice of music was unexpected, but after experiencing this game, I couldn't imagine any other song accompanying that finale. As I've made abundantly clear already, Hellblade is a story about mental illness and its effect on a person in the context of the Viking era. As you might imagine, the old Viking clans did not exactly react to mental illness in a healthy manner. Senua had basically grown up as an outcast, sheltered from society by her abusive father. Psychosis, social isolation, and child abuse don't exactly make for a particularly stable human being. Senua leaves to deal with the darkness, which is effectively a personification of her mental illness, and returns only to find that her village had been raided and her lover Dillion, the only one who ever really cared for her back home, had been killed. So the story takes us on her journey to restore his soul, and also on her own journey through the grief and sorrow compounding with her psychosis. The plot point of trying to rescue Dillion is really secondary. The main point driven home is how Senua's illness is affecting her. As you progress through the game, you can see the hardships she's been through affect her physically and emotionally. She becomes dirtier, her war paint gets smudged, she gets wounds and scars. She also grows steadily more paranoid, more irrational, and more angry. I really have to give credit to Senua's actress, Melina Juergens, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the last name there. She really did an excellent job at conveying the torture and anguish in Senua's voice. Playing a character who's coming apart at the seams is no easy feat, but she did it. Everything about the narrative was absolutely riveting. From the trials Senua was facing to the sections where you learn more about her past were incredible. As I mentioned earlier, everything builds up to one final dramatic conclusion. I obviously can't tell you what it is, but holy shit, it was powerful, and it really tied everything together. And as engaging as the narrative was, I could never tell how it would end. Throughout my playthrough, my prediction right up to the final cutscene was, the ending is either going to be bittersweet or really fucking awful. I won't tell you if that prediction was correct or not, but this uncertainty kept me engaged the whole way through, and if there's one thing I love about narrative-focused games, it's immersion. The story of Hellblade is amazing. It's what the developers were focusing on, and it shows. Definitely something that will stick with me. Okay, now finally, let's get on to gameplay. The actual gameplay of Hellblade is divided into 2 parts, puzzle/exploration and combat. During the puzzle sections, you'll typically be greeted by a locked door. The most common way to open this door is to find a certain set of symbols in the environment. These can be made up from wooden beams, shadows cast on the ground, or any number of other possibilities. Once you find them, you can use your focus ability to collect them. When you get close to the symbols, you'll see these red and orange glowing symbols all over your screen. It's a really neat effect, and it does a good job of acting as an indicator while not taking you out of the experience. It did make things a little easy because you know roughly where to stand to find a symbol, but it was nothing that killed my enjoyment. Other doors will have specific requirements based on the stage. One stage makes you find these stones that will basically set the whole place on fire, burning down the barrier. Another will require you to find the correct perspective to make hanging objects align in the shape of a symbol. There are also other little gimmicks that'll make you think outside the box, like these passageways that'll change the world slightly when you walk through them, or the section where a beast will chase you in the darkness but retreat when you're in the light. None of these puzzles are particularly challenging, but they were interesting and inventive enough to be enjoyable. The combat is pretty simple. You have your standard light and heavy attacks, and a block button which if timed properly can deflect an enemy's attack, staggering them. There's also a mechanic called focus, where once a certain amount of, I guess, energy fills up on Senua's mirror, she can access an ability where time will slow down and she can basically wail on whatever enemy is in front of her. Some enemies actually require Senua to go into focus to be attackable. I found that positioning is incredibly important in Hellblade. Pretty much any non-boss enemy is dead easy to face on their own. Once you get the hang of things, no single enemy will pose a threat. However, if multiple enemies surround you, you can get smacked around a bit, even with the voices warning you as they only give a small window of time to react. So a lot of my fights were me trying to position myself in such a way that all enemies were in my field of view, or so that I had a clear opportunity to fight one at a time and not have to worry about them sneaking up on me. One complaint I'll make about the system is that the game wasn't the best at making environment assets go transparent at the right time. There was one combat in particular that took place on a bridge, which was actually pretty cool because it restricted my movement options and had enemies spawning in front and behind me. Well, an issue that I had was that sometimes the chains holding the bridge up would be right in front of the camera and I'd have a tough time seeing what was going on. Overall, this was a minor inconvenience, but still one that shouldn't have made it into the final product. The enemies themselves are fairly simple in design. Each one has a handful of attacks telegraphed by a certain animation so you know how to react to each one. There wasn't a whole lot of enemy variety either. Most of the variety in combat came from the size and shape of the arena and in what combination of enemies they'd throw at you. I would have liked to see more enemy types because eventually after a bunch of combats things get kind of repetitive, and it doesn't help that the combat is so simple either. Now, I'm not one to advocate for complexity without purpose, but pretty much every combat in Hellblade, including boss fights by the way, went like this. React to enemy attack by dodging or parrying. Spam light attacks while they're vulnerable. Use one heavy attack if they're blocking. Use focus whenever it's up, or save it for enemies who require it. Repeat until everyone is dead. Yeah, there wasn't all that much decision making in the combat outside of positioning. The one real exception to this format was the one boss fight where you had to use heavy attacks as it was immune to light attacks. But even then, it's not all that much of an adjustment to make. And again, I'm not saying that the combat was bad, it was certainly functional and enjoyable enough in its own right, though I do really like third-person melee combat in video games, so I could be biased. But still, I know that the narrative was the focus of Hellblade, but I still think that a bit more love could have been given to the combat system. Another interesting factor I have to mention is the rot system. Early in the game, Senua gets this black corruption on her hand that slowly creeps up her arm. When this happens, the game will address the player directly for the first and only time with words on the screen. The dark rot will grow each time you fail. If the rot reaches Senua's head, her quest is over and all progress will be lost. Now this is interesting, and soon after you'll find that the rot not only grows when you die, but whenever you kill a boss, meaning that you never know how close the rot really is to wrecking everything. This makes already nerve-wracking stages absolutely terrifying. If you play this game, do yourself a favor and don't look up how much you can die. Afterwards, absolutely do it. I looked it up after beating the game and realized that this system adds so much more to the experience of Hellblade, and I appreciate what the developers did so much more now, but only because I actually experienced the uncertainty firsthand. So overall, what do I think? Hellblade is a phenomenal piece of storytelling tackling the subject of mental illness in a way that few games ever attempt, much less succeed at. The artistic direction overall served its purpose admirably. The gameplay itself was enjoyable, though the puzzles were relatively easy and the combat was somewhat simplistic. The game is also unfortunately bogged down by moderate performance issues, and some of the cutscenes have inexplicable audio desync, which really hurts in a narrative game. So if you've watched any of my reviews, you'll know that I hate traditional review scores. I don't think they do a damn bit of good. So I'm going to ask and answer the one question that's really on your minds. Is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice worth your money? Hellblade is available on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC for $29.99 or your regional equivalent. Note that the PC version includes a VR version of Hellblade when you purchase it. I'd say at that price, Hellblade is absolutely worth your money, assuming your system is capable of running it decently or if you're on console. I'm a big fan of good writing, and Hellblade has it in droves. I do have my criticisms of the gameplay, but as an entire package, it's definitely an experience worth having. Do yourself a favor and play this game. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is currently available on the June 2020 Humble Choice Bundle from Humble Bundle. For as low as $15 a month, cheaper than buying the game outright, you can take your pick from a selection of 12 games that are yours to keep forever. I'd also highly recommend The Messenger, which is an incredible platformer also available on this month's bundle. This video is not sponsored, but if you use my link down in the description, I will make some money off of it. This is a service I personally use and pay for, so it's not like I'm trying to dump some crap on you for a quick buck. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I upload every Monday, so make sure to check back in next week. Follow me on Twitter at AdsTweets for updates and memes, and follow me on Twitch at AdsGames. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next Monday.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back.